At a very young age in this business, and at a very young age period, I knew that if it wasn't journalism or this world, then I wouldn't be here. I don't know where I would be, honestly. Stuff was going on at home that was really difficult. I wasn't good at school necessarily. I wasn't really doing well in college. So I knew at a very young age I had to put all my chips into this dream that I had. I take that same mindset that I did as an intern as I do right now, which is we're not going back to the circumstances that we had before this. I'm really hard on myself with a lot of the things that I do, but the biggest thing is I have a mindset of I got to get this done or else. And I've always had that since I've been in this business. I don't want to see what the alternative will be in terms of life if I don't get this. And that's a lot of pressure that you put on yourself, but that's just been my MO from the time that I got into this business because I knew that this was like my ticket out of the circumstances that I was in.
Welcome to Pinnacle Code, where we spotlight high achievers in the culture and decode how they got to where they are today. I'm your host, Ben Arthur. Excited to be joined this week by my friend Logan Murdock. He's someone I go back several years with. He is a staff writer at The Ringer, where he covers the NBA, a league he's actually covered for a number of years. And he's someone who's been able to land a number of exclusives: Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, to name a couple people you may know. But terrific long form feature writer, heavily involved in the podcast space as well. So when I think of NBA personalities on the younger side at the top of their game, he's one of the people at the top of the list for me. So I hope through our conversation, you guys are able to extract some gems here and there. I think one of the things you'll notice the most was just his honesty about his experiences in the journalism industry. We discussed one story he reported on Jaylen Brown, which really challenged him in a way no other story has. I think maybe the thing I even loved the most was just his honesty about his situation at home and how he felt like journalism for him what was his way out. So he puts a lot of pressure on himself, maybe an unhealthy amount of pressure, but um, he's very transparent that kind of that fuel, that motivation, how he, in his eyes, he doesn't see any other way, like he can't imagine his life beyond kind of this dream he's been able to live out. So really excited to dive in. Hope you guys enjoy. So without any further ado, let's go. I know you're from the Bay. You rep that really hard, from Oakland. What do people need to know about your upbringing there to understand the man speaking to me today?
Um, I mean, my upbringing was not dissimilar to a lot of people that grew up in the Bay. You know, a lot of rides on the park growing up.
Mm.
A lot of I think the biggest thing that was cool about um my journey from the Bay is that I got to see a lot of people in the business that I'm currently in now at a very young age, right? So like when I was in high school, playing football, I got to see Marshawn. He would come to our games, or
Mm.
my one of my best friends in life, his big brother is Ryan Coogler. So we got to see, him and his trajectory and how he got to become the person that he is at a very young age, right? And then you got to go to Warriors games back in the day because they weren't very good. So you got to see, you got to they were like giving away tickets at Lucky's grocery store out here, giving away tickets for free, right? So you got to go see them. And then, the Raiders were in town at the time and the A's, right? So all that to say, like my dreams didn't seem that far fetched. The dreams that I have now and the ones that I'm currently living out didn't seem far fetched when I was a kid.
Mm.
And I think that was the magic of growing up in the Bay during the time that I grew up in the Bay. And also, you have the rise of tech, right? And
Yeah.
you have all of these things kind of coming together at one time, and we're all exposed to it. And I think that was one of the biggest things that really prepared me for where I am right now because you got to see all these things. It didn't seem like I thought that I could go to the NFL because I saw Marshawn on the sidelines and I went to his camp, and
Mhm.
Marcus Peters was my tight end, and when I was playing Pop Warner. So there were a
Yeah.
lot of different things that were happening around the time when I was growing up that it made everything tangible it made this dream like tangible and reachable. So I think that was the magic of growing up in the Bay. When I grew up in the Bay, is that I knew that I could get to this point no matter what my circumstances was.
Speaking of having like maybe your dreams feeling so tangible, I guess within that, what maybe drove your interest to want to get into journalism? Were there particular? I know we both know Mark Spears really well, but was it a connection with him, or like what exactly brought you into sports media, into doing journalism?
Yeah, it was actually my mom. She
Mm.
was at the time she was doing like what would you call it? She was working at she would do updates for like Fox Sports and ESPN and these different places. Like she would just back in the day, like you would just instead of like tweeting, you would just call like you would call like I don't know, like a service or something like that, right? She worked at this place called Metro Networks, and she would call in updates from Sacramento Kings games, like, "Hey, I'm such and such from live from Arco Arena, and this is what's going on in the game." It was like a maybe like a two minute hit tops, but that would go. She would do like hits for Westwood One and like Fox Sports and like ESPN and radio. And like if you're listening to the radio and you need updates, back in the day, you would hear her voice like doing those updates. So she would go to Kings games, and there was a game. I think it was late 2000, or it was a late in the 2003 2004 season when the Lakers played the Kings, and my favorite player growing up was Kobe Bryant, and I remember she did, like broke all journalistic protocol, and like she put me on her Bluetooth at the time or her headset or whatever, and she would be like, "Yo, just listen." So I was hearing like Phil Jackson talk, Shaq
Wow.
talk. After this, this was the game when this is the game when Kobe basically just like protested and said, "I'm not going to shoot," and he only scored like 9 points. It was like a big
Got it.
deal at
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
season, and that was the game. And so she once it like Shaq was pissed, Phil was pissed. It was like a big story. And the last person I heard on the phone was the scrum with her and Kobe Bryant. And then after the scrum, uh she goes to Kobe and she's like, "Yo, my son is a huge fan. He's actually on the phone right now." And he goes, "If she can hear me, tell him I said what's up." And I'm on the other line, like, "Oh
Wow.
wow, like this is
That's
crazy."
crazy.
And
Wow.
I and then I was like, I want to be in this world. After that conversation, I was probably like 10 years old, and I was like, I want to be in this world. I don't know how I'm gonna be in this world, but I wanted to be in this world. And so that's how it kind of the dream started about 10 years old. And I was always really good at like creative writing. I didn't like to write at all. I still to a certain degree don't like to write, but I
Mm.
was good at that. And so that the first thing happened with 10 years old, and then at I went to a school called Berkeley High, and my English teacher, my AP English teacher, Miss Bell, one of the assignments that I had during my junior year was to write about your weekend. And I just most students really just did like a diary entry of their weekend. Like at Saturday at 2 o'clock, I did this, this, and this. Me, I did like a little story behind it. Like I talked about how like my dad picked us up some Chinese food on a Friday, and then that was like I didn't know what it was, but it was like my lead. I didn't know
Got
like
it.
the actual, but I like did all of that. I just wrote like creatively what my weekend was like, and Miss Bell liked it. She was like, "Oh, you a pretty good writer." And actually, I wasn't in AP English at that time, but after that assignment, she put me in AP English. And then when I graduated high school, I kind of tried to figure out what I wanted to do, but I actually landed an internship at KFBK Radio in Sacramento. And so I
Mhm.
was living in the Bay, and I had to drive up. It was actually the 2021 not 21, excuse me. It was actually the 2011-2012 season, which was the lockout year. That was my first year. I was 18.
Mhm.
I got an internship at this radio station called KFBK Radio with Pat Walsh, and my duty was basically just to go to as many Kings games, as many sporting events as I could, and just go get sound for his morning broadcast, like organic sound, so he can do his morning radio show with the sound that I had. And so like I would just go to, it was like I said, it was the lockout year, so there was a lot of games. So I was driving up while going to school, not really going to school, but like actually just like maybe go to class here and there, and then but just bounce up to SAC and get sound. But I would also I learned the game, like I learned how to get like credentials to other places. So I would like, there was a Kings game in LA, I would bounce down to LA and just drive down on my own dime and like go see a Kings Lakers game and get sound, and then send that back up to the radio station.
Mm.
And I would also like, it was like a great experience because I was going to down. I would go to like, I would try to find any excuse to go down to LA. So I would go to like USC Trojans games, like football games. I would go to like Raiders games. I would go to anything where I can get a credential and go to the game and get sound, right? And so along the way, like I met at a really young age, I met the Sam Amings, I met the Mark Spears, I met the Marcus Thompsons, I met all of these people like at a really young age. And also as I was doing that, I was like getting a lot of on the ground training, just being around, right? And then so like I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And I remember when I was my first year, I got like this it was weird how this happened, but I wanted to do something. I want to do something on Kevin Durant. And I did there is this newspaper called the Sacramento Observer, which is an all black newspaper. It was like my first freelance assignment, and I wanted to do something on Kevin Durant. I didn't know KD at the time, and he was playing for the Thunder, and I went to I didn't know his warm up schedule, but they were playing the Kings, so I went to the game really early, and he was warming up real early. So he had this artist called Privilege, and because he still was and still is into music, like he still makes beats and stuff. Kevin does, and I wanted to do a story on his artist, so I just got there real early, and then I asked him if he wanted to talk about it. OKC Thunder PR staff is notoriously stringent with their access, so I just asked, and he was like, "Yeah," and that was my first freelance article ever, and I was like 18, and so that kind of was like, "Oh, okay, maybe I want to do this. Maybe I want to like." Maybe writing is the way, right? And then, but it took a few years for me to even kind of figure that out. And then, I was trying to just get like internships, and I was at KFBK for a long time. And then, while trying to finish school, by the way, and then went to, wound up getting, long story short, wound up getting an internship a few years later with Turner Sports, and did a summer there. That was really fun. And then I got to SJI in 2017, and I applied a lot of times, and I just didn't get it. And that was like, it was funny because that was my last time ever applying for SJI. When I got there, I was just like, I'm just gonna put my all into it. We'll see what happens. And then I got accepted, and then I went to the Memphis commercial appeal, to cover Memphis sports. But at the time, like they didn't really have a robust staff because layoffs had happened right before I got there. So I bounced around between Memphis and Nashville, and then I got a text from Marcus Thompson telling me like, "Yo, I'm leaving to go to Athletic. You need to go reach out to the San Jose Mercury News." And then a few months later, I just reached out when I got back to the Bay. And little did I know they had a Warriors opening. I mean, I knew they had a Warriors opening, but I wasn't even applying for it. I just was gonna just try to get a job. And then they asked like, "You want to cover the Warriors?" And I was like, "Yes, I do." And like that just changed my life. So sorry if you had any more questions about my bio, because I just gave it all to you. But like, yeah, that's kind of how we got from like A to B to C to where I'm at right now.
Yeah, no, that's great. I was gonna ask like how you went from having that dream to like wanting to be a part of it to some capacity to actually making it a reality. You answer that in that whole kind of journey to how you kind of got to where you are today. But like one thing I was really curious about, just being a younger Black man in the sports journalism space, specifically like in NBA media, in what ways do you think that's maybe made your experience unique?
That's a good question. I've been mulling this question because I knew you were gonna ask it. It's been helpful, in a lot of ways, just because of like the people that I've met. Like with, I'm not here without you know, my my black colleagues. I'm not here without them. I'm not here without Candace Buckner. Sending
Mhm.
me like tips on how to cover high school sports when I was covering high school sports and how to keep stats. Right. I'm not here without like the recommendations of like Spears and Greg Lee. I'm not here without Marcus telling his bosses you should look at this kid who's very green and not proven at all. I'm not here with a lot of those things, right? And I take that really to heart. And there was really a community around me when I was coming up, and a lot of that has to do, with black people trying to help other black people, and you know putting that message in your head that that's what you have to do. And especially like, and it's in a I do think we're in a better space than say like when you know Michael Wilbon was one of like only like a handful of black columnists in
In the
the
country.
country, right? And that's just from a male perspective. You talk about Jamel Hill, when she was doing it, she was like the only one, right? And Sally Jenkins, the only one. So it's gotten better, right? It's gotten a little bit more diverse. We got like a lot. We have a long way to go to get the equity that we deserve, and not just black people, right? Like it's black people, it's Asian people, it's people of color, across the spectrum, right? That we need to figure out how to get a more equitable industry, because there's still like pockets, right? Like the NBA is a bit diverse. Like I see a lot of people that I'm fans of, like James Edwards is doing this thing out in Detroit, right? And there's a few other people that are doing their thing out there. And also in leadership positions, like James Edwards, I reference him because he has a leadership position in the Pro Basketball Writers Association, right? Like there's things that are happening, and people that are put in a position to make change, but we got to continue to do that and make it more equitable for all parties that are marginalized.
You mentioned, Logan, the group of mentors that you've had, that you wouldn't be here without having all those people. What advice would you give to people on how to kind of cultivate like a group of mentors that can help you to guide you, kind of help steer you in the right direction?
Uh, I think you just gotta I think you just got to listen and take what you could take that applies to your career. The first thing is the grind, right? Like, 'cause there's a lot of people that do also probably grind too much to get the mentorship, but they also need to grind in the work that they do, And I think there's a balance that you have to have, and when you are seeking out mentorship, and also seek out the mentors that it's hard sometimes because you don't you want to be in the business, but you don't actually want to know what you want to do. So figure out what you want to do first and try to get the mentors and that will help you get to the place that you want to go, right? And then also take game from every type of mentor, right? Because I knew when I was like early in the business, I wanted to be a beat writer because Jason Jones of the Sacramento Bee was a Kings beat writer, and that's how I literally learned how to write on deadline, was watching him do it. I didn't ask him no advice or anything, but literally like I'm like, yo, Jason, it's time to go. Like, when are you gonna leave? Let's go. And he's like, I gotta write for the next hour. So I would be like, fine, whatever. And I would literally, instead of going home, I would just like sit and watch him write a gamer. And that's how I learned how to write a gamer. But then as the journey went on, I realized I didn't really want to be a beat writer, right? Like long term. And as that was happening, I'm doing a production internship under the guidance of Keith Robinson, who worked at Turner, right? And I'm learning how production works and what that's like and what television is like. And so um and then and that goes down the line, right? So you can learn anything from anyone, but I would just say like tailor who you want to talk to and where you want to talk to where you want to go. And if you don't know where you want to go, that's fine. Take pieces of game from everybody, because you can learn from people's successes, and but most importantly, you can learn from their failures just by looking and seeing them up close. And that's what I've tried to do throughout my career.
Logan, you're someone who's been able to get a number of exclusives, as I said in the beginning, with like very notable people. You mentioned at 18 getting that KD exclusive, which I didn't know about, but I know you've had other exclusives with KD. Marcus Peters. You discuss your kind of your backstory with him, but you did a really cool. I think it was a few years ago. You had that like that long form story on him. I know there are other kind of sports figures you've been able to get really cool exclusives with. What would you say it takes to cultivate the kind of relationships to make stories like those possible?
Um, I think the biggest thing, at least the way I did it, right? Like I just wasn't scared. I think a lot of people, like when Kevin like came when I was 18, came to SAC, I just was like, worst he gonna say is no, and I think I've used that attitude throughout my career. The worst they're gonna say is no, and I have gotten a lot of no's when I
Yeah,
have tried to ask people. Even now, like I get no's all the time. But it's you have to have that level of gumption just to go after it no matter what. And even if they do say no, like you're still doing a story on them, right? You're still writing, and that's something that honestly I've had to learn over the last few years is that, you know, in order because when I was working at the Bay Area News Group and later NBC Sports Bay Area covering the Warriors, like the biggest thing that you needed in this digital age was exclusives. That's just was the name of the game, right? And I wanted to get my name out there as fast as I could. But at the time, like I was competing against um, Marcus Thompson, Chris Haynes, Mark Spears, and that's just on a local level, right? Anthony Slater, that's just on a local level. Tim
mm,
Kawakami, that's on a local level. And then on a national level, I'm competing against Rachel Nichols, or I'm competing against, Stephen A. Smith. Like he comes to practice one of these days, right? Or like Wilbon, who knows these guys, right? And the way that I could set myself apart was to get those exclusives, and I knew that at a very, very young age. And a lot of that had to do with the experience that I had just interning and just seeing how people moved, and that also helped me a lot. Seeing, people get other people off to the side or how they did it. I really just, for the first 5 years that I was around the NBA, I, I didn't write much at all. I wasn't even a face. No one even knew who I was. So like with that, I could just kind of like see how, and I still like obviously study everybody still, but back then like I had no job but to study what the generation before me was doing and how they were getting their things, and I would just be like, oh, that, and you would recognize that person is the best at this, that person is the best at that. How can I bring that together to make myself really good? And so it started like it when I was covering the Warriors because the currency was exclusives, right?
yeah,
And then I still had to do it on a national level because one of the things that when I got to the Ringer, I realized like a lot of my stuff wasn't really archived, right? Like even if I did get exclusive, it wasn't archived, and or it was behind a paywall. And so my strategy, like when I first got to the Ringer, and then like the world started opening up, was to kind of like restart my archive, right? So it gave me an opportunity to reinvent myself. So what I would do was I would just be like, okay, well, I got to start from the beginning. I got to show people. I got to build back up credibility. Not to say I didn't have credibility, but build up credibility on a national stage
mhm,
with these types of things. And I just used my connections from like when I was back home to do that. And um, you know, thankfully these people were gracious with their time with me. Like, I remember when I did a thing on Kevin Durant in 2022, and that was a whirlwind because like I hadn't seen him since he like tore his Achilles in 2019 in the finals, right? And I remember my editor, Justin Verrier. It was during his one of his years in Brooklyn, but he was like, "We need you to go to Brooklyn. You go spend 10 days and go see what you get." And it was very daunting. And I remember like I saw Kevin and he agreed to sit down with me for a lot of stuff. It's talked about a lot of things, and gave me like an hour of his time, and that was a whirlwind. And we talked about a lot, um, and so those things happen, right? Like a whirlwind, things like that happen, and You never forget those moments. So it was I would just say like the biggest thing that you have to have is just a oomph and a gumption, right? And just don't be afraid to hear a no, and if you hear a no, keep going. So just have that persistence, and that's just something that I've had. You can ask anyone who's seen me throughout my career. Like, I'm a lot of things, but I'm for sure persistent in what I want to get, and I try my damnness to get things my way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So how do you develop that though? Like it seems like you got to a point to where you just kind of said F it. Like I'm just like a no isn't the end of the world. But I think for a lot of people, people get like maybe paralyzed. And this isn't just like journalists. It could be whatever field people are in. They know they have to do a particular thing, but there's a maybe a paralysis that comes with that. How do you get to the point of just saying F it and just do it? Is it just like how do you maybe get yourself in the mind frame to just kind of go for it?
Yeah, I mean, at a very young age in this business, and at a very young age period, I knew that there wasn't journalism or this world, then I wouldn't be here. I don't know where I would be, honestly. So I when I first got, the internship, it was huge for me because, at the time, like, stuff was going on at home. I don't really want to get into it, but like stuff was going on at home that, was really difficult. And it was either you get successful at this one thing that you're good at, because like I wasn't good at school necessarily. I wasn't really doing well in college. So I knew at a very young age I had to put all my chips into this dream that I had. And I take that same mindset, that I did as an intern, as I do right now, which is like we're not going back to the circumstances that we had before this.
Mm.
And so, and the other side of that, which is like, I'm really hard on myself with, a lot of the things that I do. But the biggest thing is like I have a mindset of like, I gotta get this done or else. And I've always had that since I've been in this business. And that's where the persistence comes, because I don't want to see what the alternative will be in terms of life if I don't get this. And that's a lot of pressure that you put on yourself, but that's just kind of been my MO from the time that I got into this business, because I knew that this was like my ticket out of the circumstances that I was in.
Out of that though, Logan, like maybe as you've gotten older, how have you maybe learned to maybe balance the desire of like I got to get the hell out of the situation I'm in, but also understanding that there are certain situations where you maybe need to give yourself grace, or that there's kind of growth or a learning that comes with whatever you're doing? How have you learned to maybe not always put so much pressure on yourself in certain situations?
I mean, honestly, it's been a work in progress, man. Like, I can't even tell you that I've actually done that, to be honest. It's something that I know is the right answer. But again, like it's something that's kind of in me at this point, and I'm trying to like find that balance. But it's been a journey. So I'm still figuring that out. Like I'm still in that mindset of like you got to go, and you got to do this, because like just all of the things that what you just even referenced, right? Like, but it's a work in progress. I'll say that it's been a work in progress of trying to find that balance of, yo, you can't give yourself grace versus, nah, this got to shake right now. There's no other time like the present. So I'm trying to find that balance and that grace for myself right now.
I appreciate your honesty on that because I think for like a lot of successful people, kind of that fuel, that motivation, maybe part of it comes from from a dark place, and working through something and having balance, quote unquote, isn't always uh, kind of what naturally maybe brings out the best in you in certain situations. So I appreciate kind of your honesty just in terms of kind of what you think has fueled you to get to this point. I'm curious. You've been what we've been professional journalists for 7 years, 7+ years at this point. I'm wondering what has been the reporting experience that has challenged you the most, or taught you the most about yourself.
Um, I I think it would be this. I did a piece on Jalen Brown that was came out last year in the spring of 2023. It was something basically uh, centered around the idea that he is balancing two worlds, right? Where he is trying to, be this social advocate while being a great basketball player, and the struggles that come with trying to do both, right? Just as a person, and I had known Jalen since his freshman at Cal, right? And I also knew a lot of people around him, still do. And reporting out that story was really hard. I think I started out in November 2022, and it took about 4 months to like from the
Mm.
time I started reporting to the time it came out, and that included 10 days in Boston, interviewing him, interviewing a lot of people around him, interviewing the GM, and trying all in the midst of like one of the most dissected Celtics seasons in recent memory, and also going into a terrain that I didn't really know, right? Like I didn't cover the Boston Celtics, and so um, I never really actually covered the closest thing I actually even got to cover, even being around the Boston Celtics, was in the 22 finals when the Warriors were playing against them, and that was the first time I ever been to Boston Garden and a lot of things. So I had to like fight against like the new terrain, right, that I was in, and
Yeah.
I tried to, and then also secure an interview with Jaylen Brown while also holding Jaylen Brown accountable for the things that he's either said or done, right? Like his associations with Kanye West, and
Mhm.
the friendship that's been dissected with him and Kyrie Irving, right? So I went to Boston for about 10 days and did all those things, and then uh, had to try to get an interview with Kyrie Irving, which at the time was very hard to do, and get him to speak candidly on,
Uh-huh.
his relationship with Jaylen Brown, while also trying to bring color to the reason why he left Boston, right? And there were all these different things that I had to balance while writing this piece, right? One, you want to uh make sure Jalen's voice is being, fairly um put out there based on the interview, while also, doing that with Kyrie, and then also um, you know, holding both of them accountable for the actions that they did and that they had to do. And then I remember another thing was like getting other this is when it I think we talked about early in the broadcast. It's just like it's one thing to get the exclusive, but it's another thing to like get the well-rounded story. And I remember like we were almost done, and we'd started November. I got him. I was in Boston for like 10 days in January, and then had to write a draft. It took like a week and a half to write this draft. It was a
Yeah.
beast, and then had to go to Salt Lake City for All Star Weekend while the draft is getting dissected and all these things. Then had to edit it to get it to a point where it was good for the site's standard, and then it was just about to go to the copy desk, and then my editor's like, you know what, we need one more voice. We need one more voice,
Mm.
and I had to get. There was a number of names to get for this extra voice, but I wound up trying to get DeRay McKesson, who again I didn't know and still really don't know, but I had to like get his phone number, get him to talk, and it took a week to get that out, or to even get that call made, and it was getting to the point where it might not even come out, and we finally got the extra voice in there, and it came out. And mind you, another thing, it came out the day that the Boston Celtics were in Sacramento to play the Kings, and journalistic protocol is you gotta go show up, if and it was a very polarizing story. Like it
Mm.
led it led coverage from a lot of different networks, and Jalen wasn't happy about it, but I had to stand 10 toes and you know deal with that. And that was a very interesting situation, and but it was definitely one of the hardest. It was definitely the hardest like journalistic experience that I've ever gone through, just because there were just so many. If you were gonna like take on this figure or take on this type of person who has so much nuance to him, wants to do so much good for the world, but it's kind of like having hiccups in how he wants to do that.
Mm.
And you kind of, also he's this figure that is just, that is, that and also that he's having these real thoughts about whether he wants at the time wants to stay in Boston, right? So like I'm trying to balance all of these different things, and it was a really hard piece to do to get all of these elements into one place to make a cohesive narrative, or cohesive structure, excuse me, on this player. And that was extremely hard. I think that was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And then
Mm.
also like, you know, like I like having your story on TV is tight, but then you kind of get into the it's like when you get a banger of a story, you kind of, at least for a little bit, get into the life that they live on a daily basis. And that was hard too, right? Like I'm trying to watch TV and then the stories out there, and that's great. Like I was juiced for it. I was juiced for the Ringer. I was juiced for everybody involved. But it was like a story you couldn't get away from, and like, but it was an interesting experience all the way around. But I think that was in terms of like doing a story, that was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. That piece right there, just because of just all the elements you had to get in one place to make a story kind of sing like that. And it worked out, and I'm really grateful for that story, and I'm really grateful for how it came out. But it was just that was a really hard 4 months. We'll say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, that 4 month reporting process sounds like a lot, but that blowback, all that attention, Jalen not being happy, you have to kind of show up the next day at the game. Like, I'm curious, like what it took for you to maybe get past or compartmentalize, however you want to frame it, like the response to it and the subject's response to it.
I mean, at the end of the day, we're all professionals, right? Like, so it's not the first time somebody was mad at me for something that I've written,
Yeah.
and it won't be the last. And so I just kind of took it with a grain of salt, at least that interaction. And I think just like it's kind of a weird thing, like when your stuff goes like that popping, right? Because like we all like obviously you know we're journalists and that's something we want to do. We also people, right? Like I try to go like I go on socials all the time, and just to see that it was just like, oh wow, this has got some legs here. This is kind of crazy. Like because like when you're writing a piece, you never know what's going to happen. You never know how it's going to end up. It's literally a relationship between you and the screen, and then to see like, oh wow, like this is making a huge impact. It was kind of like taking a step back, like, oh wow. But then, I had to go do another story right after that, right? Like
Yeah.
it was just it was
Keeps going.
for me, it was like a day of like, oh wow, this is crazy. But then like I had the Kings were about to make their first postseason run in like 16, 17 years. So I was already on to the next story after a while. But like for a day and like all that happening, it was kind of many. And it was taking me back to like the Warriors days where every little thing, when I was on the Warriors beat at that time was a big deal. Like everything, it felt like you were in the center of the universe. And that was just like a reminder of like being in a part of one of those stories.
Logan, what would you say is your biggest piece of advice for those who look like us coming up, or really any race, person of color, whatever, gender, about what it takes to find success in the field that we're in that seems to be changing every day. No one knows where it's going, right? Like, so what advice would you give to people looking to break into this uncertain space, but also trying to find success within a space no one really knows what the future is?
I think first of all, you got to really love it. I mean, those first when I was talking about like the internships that I was doing, like the first I was at KFBK Radio for 5 years. I didn't get paid at all. I was going to school trying to get grants. You know, trying to pay rent, and then get the and then do odd jobs here or there, right? And I was lucky in the regard that I could still, find a way to afford rent, especially in the Bay Area. You got to
Yeah.
have you got to have a love for it. You have to have the persistence to be able to do it, and you have to, um, you have to have that persistence is the biggest thing. You have to know what you want to do. You have to, and you have to work day and night, sometimes not paid, sometimes paid. So you just have to have that grit. If you're going to get to this stage of me and you talking right now, you're going to go through a lot of lumps.
Hmm.
And the first bit of lumps that I just told you, that's regardless of what color you are, right? You're going to have to you're going to have the persistence regardless of what color you are. But now that we are black, there are other things that you have to deal with, right? Like, the respectability politics of all of this, right? Or what people are like even the things of just how you dress, right? How people think you should dress. Like I remember my first couple of years, it was hard because people didn't really understand me, and they would put their whatever they thought I should be onto me, and whatever I should be onto, like my personality and what I should be doing. And there was a real pushback from me to that, and a real, I had to find my own way in a lot of ways, right? And so trust yourself too, because I had to. There was for the first few years of me being in this business, I had to trust what I was doing was right for me, because there were a lot of people in this business, some that didn't look like me, some that did look like me, that would, try to say, no, this isn't the right way to do it. You're not doing it the right way. You're not going to be in this business for a while. Or it was some people that said, like, hey man, you should quit. There were people that said,
There are
when I
people
was at
that
the Golden
literally
State
said that
Warriors
to you.
that huh?
There are people that literally said that to you.
Yeah, there was some people, like, I think my first year at the Warriors beat, somebody was like, you should quit the beat and get an internship and figure out how to do this. And said it
Wow.
to my face.
Wow.
And that's just but that's the stuff that you got to kind of deal with, right? And but you have to be persistent, like, and you have to even be more persistent, being black and being a person of color, because people are going to put a lot of labels on you, a lot of things, and you're going to have to overcome that, if you want to be successful, or even just survive in this business, let alone be successful. It's a tough, tough, tough business to be in, and make a name for. It's still tough for me right now, and it's something that I deal with all the time, um, from a lot of different entities, but it's it's a tough business for sure, especially if you're black.
Logan, where can people go to tap in with you online on social media? Keep a tab on your work on the Ringer, X, whatever.
Yeah, man. You can catch all my work at theringer.com. You can check out Real Ones. It's a podcast that I do with Raja Bell.
Yes, sir.
We do that Mondays and Thursdays. Me, Raja Bell, and Howard Beck. You can check me out on X. I'm not really on X like that, but I just put my work out. So if you want to see my work, you can check it out at Logan Murdock on X. And then yeah, I think that's where it is. You can check me out. I'm at theringer.com.
Okay. Yes, sir. And last one for you, Logan. I ask this to my guests at the end of every episode. It's more general and kind of broad, so bear with me. But um, what is one thing um, that you believe people could do more of to get a step closer to reaching their personal pinnacle, maximizing their personal potential? Do you think?
What's something they can do?
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. It's kind of a philosophical thing or something like that. It's kind of weird, but like you got to find yourself, and you gotta find yourself before. That's something that I had to figure out. Find yourself before everybody else does, and try to put labels on you. Like it's gonna be, you got to have a real big sense of self to make it in this business and in the world, because this is a very tough game to be in, and it's gonna bring you to your knees. It's gonna um it's gonna take a lot out of you, man. And it's taking a lot out of me. I'm sure it's taking a lot out of you, Ben. It's taking a lot out of anybody that's been in this business. But you gotta have a strong sense of self to succeed in this business, because um it's hard. It's really hard.
That's a fact. Logan, thank you so much for your time, and all you listeners out there, whether it be via YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify, thank you so much for tapping in with me. As always, all the love and support means a ton. Share with a friend, a family member, whoever listens to you in your orbit. It means a ton and helps me to be able to continue doing the show. But you guys know the deal. I'm back next Wednesday, 5 p.m. Central Time. We're going to keep this thing going. But until next time, I'll see you guys soon. Peace out.